Welcome back, everyone, to Debating Metal. I am your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my illustrious co-host, Chris Kaye. So we did this episode a few weeks ago, and we liked it so much we're doing it again. And what's that, you ask? Well, Chris, why don't you let them know what's on tap for tonight's episode?
2 episodes ago, we debuted Metal Mixtapes with the great year of 1986. We had a lot of fun in the 80s, but we're going to jump forward about a decade to a year that I chose. So every time we do this, we're going to kind of go back and forth, and I'm going to choose a year. And Kenneth's going to choose a year, and we'll kind of at the end of the episode tell you which is going to be the next one. And then we want to hear from you guys, and what year do you want to hear us do? So stepping into the digital age, this time we're going to use an 80-minute runtime for a mix CD.
A mix CD. So, man, I was so excited when I got my first computer in 1996. So that tells you how long ago that was. And when I bought the computer, it was about as basic as you could possibly make a computer. And I don't think I had a CD writer on it. I think I later installed a CD writer on it, but I'm not sure. But I did know that was something that I wanted. I had, discovered, like a year later that you could do that stuff. So I'm like, oh, I need to do that. And shortly thereafter, I was buying 80-minute CDs and making mostly greatest hits. I didn't do a lot of mixed CDs, but I did a couple, and I did a lot of greatest hits. I loved making greatest hits because along with it, I made the graphics of the CD package, so I could put it in my CD collection, and it would look just like a regular CD or album that was in the collection of the band. So that was my intention. I love doing that shit.
I think it was a while before I was doing any graphics for CDs. I want to say my first CD burner was probably 1999. My first computer would have been 96, I think. So that one was this all-in-one compact. And it was like the monitor was even attached to the computer itself. And so I got my first personal computer in 1999. So I think that was when I got my burner at that time. And man, I got a stack of CDs and I just started making mixes. I had a whole CD like flip book that you keep in a car. And I had that thing full of all kinds of different stuff. I mean, when did Napster come out? Like, obviously, I never used Napster. Um,
That was 99, 98-ish,
yeah,
99.
so, I mean, I definitely did not use that to make tons of mixed CDs. So,
Well, what's funny, you say it like that. I didn't know anything about Napster. I didn't know anything about MP3. So when I say that I bought my first CD writer, I had that computer for a while. I'm probably going to say that the CD writer I didn't get for a couple of years, because I started working the following year for a company called Tiger Direct that sold computers and computer parts through a catalog, and you called in and you placed the order. And we shipped it to you, or they shipped it to you.
oh, that's crazy. Napster was only around from 99 to 2002. Seems like a lot longer.
Yeah, well, right after when Napster had its issues with Metallica, then LimeWire took off.
Mm.
So, but what's funny, what I was trying to get at before when you was talking about the Napster things, like I didn't even know about MP3s. Like I knew I could take CDs, and I didn't know anything about quote unquote ripping them. I knew I could take a CD, a song from a CD, and transfer it to my computer, but I never knew anything about MP3s. I did it as waves,
Mm.
right? So then when I did that, I saved the song and then I transferred it onto another CD. Once, so, like I remember some guy when I was at Tiger comes up to me, he goes, dude, this is the mother load. And he's holding up a hard drive. And I'm like, what's the big deal about the hard drive? And he goes, it's got them all on here. I go, got what? He's like, MP3s. I got like 10,000 MP3s or something like that. And, some ungodly number at the time. And I'm like, what the hell's an MP3? And he goes, you don't know what an MP3 is? And when, we basically like had a class on MP3s and shit like that and how to rip music and all that stuff. So that's an interesting time at the end of the 90s there when it came to all this. I don't want to use the term inventions, but it was these creations, these things. I don't know. It's not an invention. I mean, MP3s technically, when waves, wave files and CDs came out, all that shit technically existed. They knew, it was a wave file, but the advent, if you will, of MP3s and its popularity and its ability to be transferred from one place to another was a revolutionary concept.
Yeah, I mean it was way more convenient, and just being able to, you know, put a. I mean, you had to use like a software of some type to burn, right? And
Easy
so you
CD
could,
creator.
yeah, I mean that was certainly one that was available. So like you open that software, drop the MP3 files or whatever type of files were compatible, and then it would burn it. And the things that were I guess not interesting, but like there were limitations to it, right? Like there were things like it would seem like that all that could fit on it, and then it would say basically have like slight delays in between songs, or different softwares would cause that, and so like say for instance you had two tracks back to back that would, should bleed into the next one, like say Hellion Electric Eye, then there'd be like a delay between the two.
It'd be a 2-second gap.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that is that the 2-second gap, it was actually cutting off the song. It wasn't even starting from the beginning. The 2 seconds is literally you lost 2 seconds of the song. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
What kind of horseshit is this? So when I was whatever software it was and I discovered that I could just go continuous, I was like, oh, that's a game changer.
Yeah, there was evolutions in that process throughout the whole thing, and then obviously music editing software helped in that too. Because if there was like music, or some songs have like a little clip in them of something, and it's like there's a gap in between, and then maybe like a spoken word section, you could edit those out, or things like that. So I mean, I made a shit ton of mixed CDs over the years where I made alterations to songs, or I remember taking like Metalingus from Alter Bridge and editing it into the version that Edge used when he was a wrestler, or I mean he still is a wrestler, but like when like I guess he even uses it now, right?
Yeah, he
So
still
like
uses it now.
yeah, so like it starts off with pretty much the ending of the song with the heavy drum beats and everything, and then the way that it's edited, it moves around. So like I use that software to kind of change that, and then used like fireworks sound effects, like royalty free fireworks sounds to make like the explosions. So like
Uh-huh.
like those were like days. Like this is going to be fun for me because this is an era I remember really well. Like 86, obviously, that's when I was born. I put together a mixtape of what I, grew up listening to, what I would have listened to, but this is something that I possibly put something just like this together.
Well, that's cool. I just remember like, you know, when I started working at this company at Tiger, I was so excited about different softwares that I would learn. And then one day some guy comes in and he has this software called SoundForge.
I
And,
remember Soundforge, yeah.
I had the first one. and then he gave me acid loops. But he gave me the acid. I think at the time it was like acid 3.0. It was still early on, but acid had been out. Soundforge, I think, was Soundforge 1, or they may have bumped it up to 2.0 and finally made it public. It was crazy. It was so early on. And Soundforge to me was just like, oh, I mean, it's basically what Audacity is now, but to me, it was much more robust at the time. And I was able to do all sorts of things with that thing. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I love editing songs. I mean, that's literally something I love to do today. And that was a game changer for me. And then being able to, use some stuff for loops and make my own, like, your own little beats on the loop on acid was cool as well. But I was never a songwriter in that regard. And then there was also a company called Nito where you can put the labels on the CDs, and this thing helped you make sure that it was centered on the CD every time you put it on there. Oh man, that software, because it was Nito was a physical thing to help you with the stickers that would go on the CDs, but it was also a software that would help you design what you put on the CDs. So I was all about that shit, man. I love that. And so being able to do this little tape, this is good, or CD is going to bring me back some memories. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get started?
All right, let's get started. So last time we did this, actually, you went first. So I'm going to go first. Now we're doing a CD. So instead of flipping over the tape like we did on Mixtape 86, we're just going to have a continuous flow for 18, 19 songs. So hopefully you guys don't get bored out there. You'll be interested in the songs that we play, or not play, but, announce or say or talk about. All right. So as everyone probably knows who's listened to this show on any sort of regular basis, I really enjoy putting songs when I do like our greatest hits, or what's the other one that we do? Mostly greatest hits. We put it into concert set list order. So this one is a little different when you have songs that are from so many different bands. It's hard to sit there and say, oh, this is going to be, a beginning song is going to be an ending song, because a lot of these songs are brand new. They're singles, they're fun, but you don't know if they're going to be everlasting kind of thing. So that being said, my first song to open up my CD is Resurrection from Halford. Now,
that's a good start,
man. So yeah, I mean, it starts out with that fade in of Rob, screaming Resurrection. The song is amazing. I mean, obviously everyone knows it was right around this time when he made this album. It was very obvious, very evident to the public that he wanted to be back in Judas Priest. I mean, this song is all about him returning to metal, returning to becoming the metal god, and reclaiming his throne, essentially. And through that, you knew he was eventually going to get back into Judas Priest, because these songs were just perfect for Priest fans, So
yeah, I think it's a killer song. I love the way it starts, and then it kind of like tells the story of Rob in a way. It's a great track.
it's totally autobiographical.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that album. Yeah, that album itself is an absolute classic. Yeah, I mean it is that reinvention of Rob Halford, and we've seen him live. We're both big fans of the bands, or of Judas Priest and Halford alone. So, and pretty much all of his projects except for two. I have actually something off of it, but I don't have that track. Yeah.
I wish Halford was still around in terms of the band.
Yeah.
But and it's funny because they won't play any solo stuff. And I get that. It's just like Iron Maiden doesn't play solo stuff from Bruce Dickinson, but it would be nice, like we're gonna see Bruce in a couple months or something like that.
Yeah,
So that'll be exciting. All right, so song number 2 for me, we go from a veteran who is returning to the scene after having his fun with his side project 2. We're going to a brand new band that just broke out, a band called Disturbed with The Game off of The Sickness. That's the second song on the album, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I had it listed and I just kind of turned it away. Duh. And I know you're not a big Disturbed fan. You like them more now than you did before. Um,
I like more their modern stuff than I like their stuff from this era. What I will say is they like there are bands that have their own distinct sound, and I have a lot of respect for that because that is really a defining trait. And so there's so many bands out there that just like if you hear one of them and then you hear another, you might not even know who like that they're really different and maybe good songs or whatever, but like there are certain bands and like it's really David Draymond. I would say that is the biggest factor because the way he sings, his enunciation and everything like that, like it is it's very defining of that band.
Oh, it's very distinctive,
Yeah.
and then it's absolutely true what you're saying when it comes to the new sound nowadays. I mean, all the drum sounds from bands sound the same today.
Yeah.
Nobody who's playing drums in bands today that are out there and popular are playing anything that makes them stand out from the next guy, and that bugs the hell out of me. I mean, you're relying on your singer and or your guitar player to make the difference in your songs. You know what? As a band, realistically, it should be all five of you. Now, the hardest person to make a distinct difference would be a bass player, but drummers, sound, and obviously the tone of guitars and a vocalist make all the difference in the world. And obviously, Disturbed is very distinct, but man, nowadays it's all the same. You know,
Yeah.
songs may be better, songs may be good, but still, if your song, if you got a good song and the next guy and you sound just like the next guy and he has a good song, you're going to get lost in the shuffle. Anyway, song number 3 for me is going to be another band that was relatively new at the time. This is going to be off their second album. This is the song "Awake" from Godsmack off the album "Awake."
I don't even know what that song is.
So if for any Godsmack fans out there, I'm a big Godsmack fan. I have tailed off completely from what they're doing right now. Just the last album was just more of a pop rock, hard rock album. And I would sit there and say anything off of Load and Reload is heavier than anything that's on the latest Godsmack album.
Oh wow.
Um, and for 20 years essentially, or maybe let's say 15, right? Godsmack was a heavy metal band. They got lumped into the whole new metal thing, but there's nothing in there that they did any sort of rapping. There's nothing in there that they had anything where they had uh guest artists play on their songs. They basically just played straight up metal music. I mean, it wasn't metal like uh like anything Anthrax or anything from was goddamn melodic death metal or anything like that, but it's still straightforward metal. It's like Armored Saint, very straightforward metal, like Iron Maiden. This album was so distinctly different from the first album in that it got heavier. It was definitively metal as opposed to the first one was kind of like almost too happy in some degree. You had that song Whatever, which everybody liked. It was a big radio hit, but there was a dark side, that you could sense from Godsmack. If you really like that first album, then you get into the second album, you're like, oh, here we go. Now it sounds like this is a band, and then they went into their third album, Faceless. Was just they broke out completely at that time. That was when they got on the Scorpion King with I Stand Alone and all that stuff. So
I know that one. Yeah.
yeah, but Awake, really good song. That's number 3 for me. Number 4, another new band from this era. This is good, definitely going to be a new metal song for some, or for most everyone. Linkin Park with One Step Closer, off of Hybrid Theory. Now, that song today is still pretty awesome. I mean, I like that song. For everyone out there who's listened for the last 5 years, we don't talk about new metal much, but new metal was a genre that I spent a lot of time listening to because that's what was on the radio. And I didn't really listen to a lot of internet radio, but Godsmack, Disturbed, Linkin Park, Papa Roach, Limp Bizkit, all those bands that were big, they were there. I mean, I listened to them all. So
Yeah, I mean, that's new metal's a genre I never got into, right? We've talked about this before, but Linkin Park, I mean, it was one of those bands that people around me really liked, but I was into the heavier stuff. Obviously, like we'll talk about like what's on my list later, but um I don't know. I never got into them. Like they were, I think they did the theme songs for the Transformers movies, and that was probably the most I ever heard them because I was into Transformers growing up, and when the live action movies came out, that was kind of a big deal. So that was probably the closest I got into them. But there's a lot of people that I grew up with, and I would say like high school, middle school, that liked Linkin Park that I didn't get along with. So I always kind of associated it with that and. I think I have more respect for, especially with Chester's vocals and his abilities now. But I mean, One Step Closer was a massive hit. Everybody knew it, whether you like it or not. I mean, it was a huge song.
oh
So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the second album. So this is off of Hybrid Theory. The second album, Meteora. I got the deluxe version of it, and it came along with the making of DVD. And I gained a tremendous amount of respect for those musicians because they were playing their parts, and it was the recording of the album. It was a very good album. It was another big hit for them. They had 2 smashes off that album, and I give them all the proper respect in the world. All right, so song number 5 for me is from a band I'm not super into. Uh, this was part of the new metal scene that I don't know, I didn't vibe on it too much. And this is Papa Roach with Last Resort, off of the Infest album. It's their first thing. It's the biggest song that they basically had at the time. They had a couple of others over the years. To me, this is the one that when people hear it, they know what song it is. They start singing it, and it's just one of those that it's so catchy that everybody knows the song.
I do not like this song. Uh, um, Papa Roach was definitely one of those bands I just could not get into at all. Yeah, I remember seeing their album cover and just being like, why the fuck would you put a roach on your album cover? I know they're called Papa Roach, but come on, like, ugh. Um, I don't know, just not for me, not at
It,
all.
it, it wasn't my like when I first heard that song. I think I heard it at my mom's house. My brother was playing it, and I had no idea what it was. Like I had heard people talking about it. Like I didn't even know who Linkin Park was at the time. It was just a weird. The whole that 2000 year was just kind of weird for me, and I don't know. I just
I mean, it's so funny how these bands like this era, this is so tied into wrestling.
oh yeah.
Like this song specifically, I want to say was in Ready to Rumble, like the really terrible wrestling movie that I liked when I was a kid. But then now I look at it and I go, well, they're really making fun of wrestling fans throughout this whole movie.
Well, I ended up the only time I actually kind of got into Papa Roach was in 2004 when I got back into the record store business, and their album "Getting Away with Murder" came out, and I actually liked that song a lot. "Getting Away with Murder," I thought that was a pretty cool song. A little definitely different than "Last Resort." So, but that's for another time, another year that we're going to talk about. All right, number 6. We're still in the new metal range. We're still in that phase. And it's one of the bands that they were basically, you loved them or you hated them. I was kind of with them for the most part. Limp Bizkit would Take a Look Around from the Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water album, as well as Mission Impossible 2, MI2. And so this song to me, man, is it's heavy. I mean, you could sit there and talk about, oh, they're rapping and stuff like that. The verses, they got a nice little melody going on, but man, when it gets to that pre-chorus and chorus, holy shit, that's heavy. I mean, that's definitely a breakdown and a half right there.
So Limp Bizkit, you know, I think that now they've kind of found like a fandom again. Because the first couple albums, I want to say it was like really around this album was where they hit their stride, right? And that was the biggest one. So what I would say about them is their music was very simplistic, but they had something there because they had Wes Borland playing guitars, which it's such an interesting thing to listen to interviews from him specifically because he's got to be their biggest hater, like I think he despised being in the band while also it's what made him successful because like he left the band sometime after this album and and then ended up coming back to it because the stuff that he did solo, like I remember everybody talking about, oh, Wes Borland's going on his own, like he left Limp Bizkit, he's going to do amazing stuff. He's doing some weird shit, like and so, I think it's one of those things like they were, there was other bands doing rap metal and this and that, but like again, this is a band that had their own sound and there in that regard like I have the respect there. Now I remember, I mean it's not for me, like I remember a couple of the major songs because again they're tied to wrestling, like it was My Way or the Highway on this
Yes,
one.
my way was on this album.
Okay, so that one was the theme song from it was like the promos for WrestleMania 17. Rollin' was the Undertaker's theme song. Like they were tied to this era. Um, and then I think whenever they did their next album, they used one of their songs off of that album for another WrestleMania. So, in my mind, a lot of these bands are tied to that, but it's I think it's a good story to see. Like I like a comeback story, and I like to see somebody come back and like you know I have expressed that I was never the biggest Creed fan, but I think it's silly how they were beloved and then all of a sudden hated, and it's the same with Limp Bizkit. Like if you like something, just like it. Don't be a fucking poser. Just like it. So
It was
that, that's my you know
There you go.
diatribe.
I accept. No, I get what you mean. If you're going to hate something, you hate it. But over the years, there's lots of feelings change, and
Yeah.
things, with the with culture and or pop culture and society ever changing day in and day out, it has its ebbs and flows in terms of being ultra conservative, then it's being ultra liberal and all that stuff in terms of how people
Yeah, I mean you can look at some of their lyrics and say they're a bit,
oh yeah.
misogynistic or whatever, but they're of the time, and I think it's just one thing to keep in mind that it's just music. It's like just watching a horror movie doesn't make you a murderer either. So,
That's a good thing. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
all right. So, but that soundtrack by itself was amazing. There's a lot of songs on that soundtrack that
You talking about Mission
Mission
Impossible
Impossible
2?
2. I mean, the song list, just to kind of get what that track listing is. So listen to the songs that were on this soundtrack: take a look around. I Disappear from Metallica, Scum of the Earth from Rob Zombie. Let's see. They Came In from the Butthole Surfers, Rocket Science from the Pimps.
They came in butthole surfers.
They came in.
Oh
Came in. Butthole Surfers. Okay. Have a Cigar, cover from the Foo Fighters. Mission 2000, a Chris Cornell song. Going Down, which is a song that appears on the Awake album for Godsmack. What You Looking At from Uncle Cracker. Backwards are Apartment 26, Diffuser with Karma, Alone from Buck Cherry, Immune from Tin Fed, Not My Kind of Scene from Powderfinger, and Carnival from Tori Amos. And then there's a Hans Zimmer track at the end. I mean, it's got some really powerful artists on this one. And there was,
I mean, yeah, Hans Zimmer.
they say he's a big time composer.
I mean, he did Batman,
Yeah.
like the Dark Knight movies, and Dunkirk. I want to say was Man of Steel, Interstellar. He did some killer
he's
stuff.
Shit, dude. He's like John Williams. So, but we're not talking about composers anyway. Let's move on. Okay, so here's a band that I was very confused when this song came out, man, because I'm like, what is going on? Judith from A Perfect Circle off of their Mare de Noms CD.
Okay,
dude, I was like, is this Tool? Because this sounds like Tool, and everybody's telling me, no, it's Perfect Circle. They're so different from Tool. Really? Because that fucking song sounds exactly like Tool. That's a Tool
I
song.
would say there's obvious similarities. I mean, Maynard being the singer, but there are differences. Some of the instrumentation and the vibe is a bit different, but this easily could be Tool. This album specifically is the closest to Tool that a Perfect Circle did. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not even like talking about the album so much as, man, that when I heard Judith, I'm like, really? It was just so Tool-like, and I'm like, okay, well, that's why I like the song.
yeah.
So anyway, that was an interesting one for me.
Yeah, I mean I mean, I'm not the biggest Tool fan, but I did go through a phase where I really enjoyed a lot of their stuff. I still think Undertow's my favorite of their albums. But as far as A Perfect Circle goes, I liked this album more than I liked the ones that followed. Because they really took a very different direction, a lot softer sound, and that was after some shakeups with the lineup. So I want to say is Billy Howardell was the primary songwriter, the guitarist, right?
I have no idea. I don't know anything about them.
Oh, okay. I mean, and Maynard, obviously. So they had changed some of the lineup, and so the stuff that follows, it still feels like the same band, but it's definitely a lot softer and a lot different. So it's a good pick. I surprisingly do like that song.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good song. I mean, I just put that way. It was popular, and it was all over the radio at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm going to a band that I've known from the 80s. So they've been around for a while, but they had basically dropped off the map. Grunge hit them pretty hard. They had one band member change, which turned into two band member changes. And then they kind of reunited. When they reunited, they basically released this album, which had been in the works for a few years. This is Sexual Thing from Poison off of Crack a Smile and More. The and more of Crack a Smile is the unplugged that was on MTV years earlier. This album was recorded in 1994, 1995, and then released in 2000. So Sexual Thing was a pretty cool hit. It was basically the reintroduction of Poison back into, I guess, modern society.
It sounds like they just got released from prison.
Dude, they were in grunge prison because they couldn't. I mean, they didn't do very well in the grunge era, obviously.
Yeah.
So they got out of grunge prison and they released this album. And since then, they've been a fantastic. What do they call those now? Legacy band, because I'm sorry, they've released new music They've released a couple of new albums since that time. They haven't done much with them. They don't even play the songs off them. They just play all the hits. And bottom line is they're a legacy band now.
Yeah.
Um, and not even that much. They're not even touring as much. They're supposed to go on tour next year. This big, huge anniversary tour, but we'll see what happens. I just read an article with Ricky Rocket, hoping that Brett Michaels signs off on this big package that they can be involved with. So anyway, then next song, number 9, we're gonna be going back to the old groups, the Stone Age, AC/DC with Stiff Upper Lip off the Stiff Upper Lip album. What do you think of that song?
I mean, I like the track itself. I one of my first memories of AC/DC was seeing them on Saturday Night Live, and I believe it was this song, and that was how I kind of got into them and started discovering them. Obviously, I became more of a fan of the Bon Scott era, as I've said before, but I think every Brian Johnson album has a few really, really good tracks, and this is one of the ones that always stuck out to me.
Yeah, this was a good album in those kinds of terms. AC/DC, was basically at this point after they had converted back to what they were. They converted back to being a blues band
This is a
that
very
played really
bluesy
hard.
album. Yeah.
Yeah, they converted back. Well, it all started with Ball Breaker. When Phil Rudd came back to the band, they basically kind of went back to that Let There Be Rock, Dirty Deeds kind of style, but with the more modern production and still kind of have the heavy crunch on the guitars.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, but it was very groove oriented in terms of like with Ball Breaker. This album continued that trend. And they had a couple good songs. Stiff Upper Lip, Safe in New York City, and Satellite Blues were all hit singles for them. But to me, Stiff Upper Lip, it's just typical AC/DC. Good melody, good hook, and Angus Young bopping his head up and down. And so this was classic stuff at the time when you wanted, especially for someone like me who still holding on to the late 70s and 80s music, and then having gone through the grunge era, seeing AC/DC still put out a pretty cool album was fun. All right. Now this next song, I'm going to be completely honest. Song number 10 for me is one of these songs that I really didn't grasp it at the time. I've really come to like it now much more, but at the time it wasn't one of those things that was really on my radar. This is After Me the Flood from Armored Saint off of Revelation. It's such a good album, but it was one of those things that just really did not grab my attention at the time because I was like, oh, Armored Saint's back. And as fast as they came back is as fast as they went. And I was like, man, because they had been gone for so long because of the whole John Bush leaving Armored Saint to join Anthrax. So this was the first album back together. This is a great song, After Me the Flood. They got No Me Digas is on that album with John Bush singing in Spanish. Really good stuff on this album.
Yeah, it's one of the albums that maybe I just haven't given enough attention to, because I really like their earlier stuff and some of the more recent stuff. But there's little pockets in there that I probably just need to give more listens. But at this time I was really not aware of Armored Saint too much. So
nobody was because they had been
valid
broken up.
valid point. Yeah.
So now we're going to go ahead and take a break from my list, and we're going to go ahead and jump on Chris's list. So he's going to do his first 10, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I'm going to start it off with one of a song off of one of my favorite albums, Pinball Map from In Flames. It's the second track on that album. Clayman is definitely my favorite In Flames album and one of my favorite albums, period. It's a really cool track to kind of just start things off on. It's very fast paced, lightning, fast, and not lightning fast, maybe like slightly less than lightning fast, but um, yeah, I mean, it's one of those albums that I remember picking up in 2000 when it came out, and just being stuck in my CD player for a long time, and blasting it on my Bose speakers that I still have to this day, and just absolutely a killer track. And it's one of those that like I just go back to from time to time because it's one of those like it'll stick with me forever.
You turned me on to this song. You turned me on. It's weird. You turned me on to In Flames, but I knew who they were.
Hmm.
But I really had never heard them. And you obviously told me listen to this album first. Blah blah blah. I love the first two songs on this album, especially Pinball Map. I mean, as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, I got to put this on my playlist. So this is definitely a song that I like. Now, I tell you this in all honest truth out there, everybody who's listening, I did not include a lot of these songs that Chris is going to talk about, and I don't know what his list is, but I can almost guarantee a lot of them are not stuff that I listened to back in 2000, and that's the reason why I didn't pick them. I picked songs that I was listening to,
Yeah, no,
just like Chris is picking songs that he listened to.
yeah, I really
I didn't want to be fake about it.
Yeah, I really based it around like that time period, and so like I kind of expected you would do the same. Like this is iconic eras for different reasons, right?
Right.
Um, so my second track is Gallowmere from Synergy, from their To Hell and Back album. Synergy was a band that at the time, like kind of struggled to get into when their first album came out, and I was really disappointed because it was a huge power band. I mean, sorry, that's the wrong way to say it. It was I was going to say power metal, but it was a super group essentially. So it was formed by Kimberly Goss, who was Alexi Lyo's wife. That's of Children of Bottom fame, and then Jesper Stromblad, who was the guitarist and songwriter for In Flames, was in the band, and then Ropa Latvala, who was from Stone. And so all these bands that I was like super into, and then he would eventually join Children Bottom as well. So like there was that all that crossover, and so the first album, it's not bad by any means, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I just the two legendary songwriters from two of my favorite bands got together and didn't put out like something phenomenal, and I was upset, right? So the second album comes out, and I almost didn't buy it. And then I was at what's it called, Diamond Head Records, which I used to go to when I was a kid, and I saw it on the shelf, and I didn't see anything else that I wanted to buy that day, and I was just like, you know what, I'll buy it, and I was super happy. Now Jesper had left the band by that point, but the results ended up being a lot better, I think, and the second album was really killer. And Gallowmere is my favorite track of that album. It's one of those like it tells kind of a story, and it's really fun to listen to. And I think it's like pacing wise, it's a really good place for it as track two.
Pretty cool. I had no idea about this whatsoever. Um, but knowing that Alexi's on it, I'm gonna give this shit a spin. And
It's a little more accessible than Children of Bottom is too. So it has like clean vocals, and so it's a little easier, I think, for some fans to get into because it's not like the growls and screams and stuff like that.
cool. Did you know Jesper's in the Halo Effect?
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
My track three is Hunting High and Low from Stradivarius. So they're another Finnish power metal band. This is off their Infinite album. I was a big fan of Stradivarius. I like. There's two eras really of the band, and that's with the original singer and songwriter Timo Tolkki, and then they hired a singer to kind of replace him so he could focus on just writing the music, playing guitars, and that was Timo Kotapelto. And so I really like his vocals a lot more, and I think just focusing on the songwriting and everything really elevated the band a lot. This is one of my favorite albums that they put out, and this is a really cool track. I got into power metal around this time. I was really starting to get into like the Gothenburg stuff, like Within Flames and the like of that. But I was also getting into power metal and finding bands like Angra and Stradivarius and some of the others I'll mention later. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't checked them out, check out this song, Eagle Heart, and some of the others. Like I definitely recommend it. Like if you're into kind of more uplifting metal, it's really cool stuff.
Cool. You know, oddly enough, I never heard him, but I did hear of the name, and was always curious because you see these ads from magazines and it's Stradivarius. Who's that? And I mean, it sounds like obviously a violin. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean it's based on
Yeah,
that name. Yeah.
exactly. Right. So when I was like, man, this is pretty cool. Um, I got to check it out, but I have never done so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know some of the stuff that you've listed before, but like there are a couple tracks of yours that I'll check out that I am not as familiar with. But this is one I definitely recommend. Like, just give it a listen, and I think you'll like it. So my track four is another band from that Gothenburg sound. Dark Tranquility's The Same. And that's off of their Haven album. And so Haven came out, and I was a big fan of it, but I felt like there was maybe like a little something missing. And so the album that followed it in the next few years is still my favorite Dark Tranquility album. But this one right here is it's really solid, and I had a little bit of there's two tracks that I just absolutely love on this album. One's called Fabric and The Same. And I picked The Same because it gave me a little bit of like a slower pace than some of this. It's not like a slow song by any means, but it does kind of slow the pace from the last few songs that I had. And it's also it has like some really epic guitar riffs, and like the solo in it is absolutely great. And so yeah, I would definitely check this one out because it's one of those albums that will always stick with me. I remember listening to it driving in my Jeep, and just good memories, good memories.
Cool.
Um,
Cool.
my next track is one of probably my favorite song from Children of Bottom. Kissing the Shadows from Follow the Reaper. Follow the Reaper is a lot of people's favorite album from that band. It is the last really truly neoclassical album, because some of the stuff that followed, it was less focused on the classical elements and the solos, but obviously Bottom, continued to be, one of those bands that's really what's the word, like aggressive and just always creative, always exciting, and sometimes brought in elements from different genres of music and things like that. Like that last album, I think was it called Mixed? Um, I may be mixing up the name, but even to the last days, Alexi was still bringing in new concepts and trying new things, and so what I love about this album itself is that it's a complete front to back album, just banger after banger. But what what this song does is it has a solo trade off for the last like 2 minutes of the track between Alexi and Yana, the keyboardist, and they just go back and forth with these amazing solos. And it's like I was so glad that when I got to see them live, on the first time I got to see them, they were the headlining act, and they played this track, and they didn't really play it a lot at that time, and so like it's one of those moments where I was just mind blown. Like when you and I saw Sammy Hagar and he played 5150. That's one of those things where I didn't think it was going to happen. You're holding out hope. You're like, oh man, it'd be cool if they did this, and when they do, like I was like jumping up in the air. you know.
Oh, no, I remember that.
So, Kissing the Shadows, track 5.
So Hexed was the last album
Yeah,
from
okay, so I
Children
had
of
their
Bodom.
name right. It sounded right, but I couldn't think of it. So,
So Children of Bodom is one of these bands that you turned me on to. I actually had seen them once live in concert. I believe they opened for
Megadeth.
uh it was Megadeth
Yeah.
that
You and
they
I
opened
were
for.
at
Yeah.
the same
So,
show, but we didn't know each other.
that's right. So yeah, so I was at the show that I watched it. I remember seeing the star power that Alexi has, because you could just tell he stood out above the rest when it came to his guitar playing. Um, but I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know the songs. For me, a lot of that stuff was I wasn't used to the vocals,
Mm.
and so it's one of those things where I'm like, I didn't understand it enough to get into it, and that was one of those things where I'm like, okay, it's another screaming band. So, but you could tell, like, I mean, as soon as Alexi started playing or had a guitar solo, I mean, spotlights on him, and so you could tell he was the main thing of that band.
Yeah. No, and that's very true. Like he stood out in a way, like, and it wasn't just the presentation. Like there was some aura around the guy.
Oh, of course.
All right, so my track 6 is The Wicker Man from Iron Maiden, Brave New World. So that was the first album that brought Bruce back after their time with Blaze Bailey. And man, what a great album. And this is by far my favorite track off of that album. I love the stuff, like Blood Brothers and really, honestly, the whole thing. Like that is one of those front to back albums, and it was such a pleasant surprise because you have such a phenomenal band, and then it kind of drops off towards the end of the Bruce era, and then I think most fans would probably agree that the Blaze era was a decline. There's a few good songs from that time period, but it's just not what you would expect from Iron Maiden. And then they come back and they're different. It's a little more progressive, but just really killer tracks, great songwriting, um, and you get three guitarists with unique voices, and it's just awesome, awesome stuff.
This album, when I heard Maiden was coming back together, I was so excited for this album, and to hear this song just rip as soon as you start the CD. Oh my god, how good of a freaking song is this? And then you go on to the rest of the album, and while it kind of slows down a little bit, Brave New World and uh was it Ghost of Navigator? It's they're not slow. They slow the pace down because that's that typical slowish kind of intro that Maiden has now. That the pace picks up a little bit and it comes back down towards the end. It's something that a lot of Maiden fans had to get used to. If they had been continuous fans, they had kind of gotten hit with that a little bit early with the two Blaze albums. But then knowing that was going to be their songwriting stuff from that point on, if you were a fan and you liked it, you picked up on it, it was great. If you were coming back to the fold, it was kind of like, whoa. The Wicker Man was like, oh yeah, this is going to bring me in. The rest of the album was kind of a little bit of a shock to the senses for those coming back to the fold after not hearing them for 10 years. It's a big difference.
Yeah, no, it's,
But
it's definitely different, but it's still
it was
absolutely great.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. And they've continued on with banger album after banger album, since that time. And, you know, uh, Senjutsu and Book of Souls have been two outstanding albums that have come out in the last 10 years between the two of
Yeah.
them. So,
So track 7, it follows pretty close after, directly after another song with Bruce Dickinson on it. So I've got the one I referenced earlier when you mentioned Resurrection. I've got the one you love to hate from Halford.
That's the one I thought you were going to put on there.
Yeah, it's a killer song. It's got Bruce Dickinson and Rob Halford on vocals. It is a phenomenal track, and I love the trade-off between the two vocalists. They have obviously their similarities, but they're very different, and it's so cool to hear them singing something together. So, yeah, I mean, just what a duet, like Rob Halford and Bruce Dickinson together.
That was amazing to hear. And then, just man, that riff on that song is so good.
Hmm.
And then just the song itself was really good. And then the two just put in a performance on this song, and it was just amazing. And at the time that song came out, there was all sorts of rumors that the Three Tremors were going to be playing, and it was going to be Jeff Tate. I guess there was some issues with Ronnie James Dio or whatever. He had some commitments, but Jeff Tate was going to be the third Tremor. So they were kind of taking a poke at the three tenors from the classical music. And they were doing the Three Tremors, which was these three amazing metal singers. Never really got off the ground, but this song was the start of the rumors, and I'll take it every day of the week.
Yeah, what a shame. Like, can you imagine? I mean, even with Jeff Tate, either Jeff Tate or Dio, like the three of them together, have been freaking amazing. Um,
I think it was the record companies that wanted Jeff Tate,
mm,
because if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Ronnie James Dio was on a different label, wasn't independent or so. I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of legalities.
mm. Well, shame it'll never happen. Um, so my track 8 is "We Disintegrate" from Nevermore, "Dead Heart" and "Dead World." That was a really good album. That's probably my favorite Nevermore album. Um, I'm having a lot of favorite. It's so funny because I really did pick this year kind of randomly. I didn't I I didn't really base it on anything specifically. I was just thinking like we spend a lot of time talking about the 80s because the 80s is awesome. Um but I was just thinking like let's take it a little further, and I wanted to kind of challenge myself. So I was thinking like, okay, kind of new metal era. And then I didn't realize how much awesome stuff was around this time. So, yeah, like Nevermore was a band that I got into because I saw Jeff Loomis, and I actually got to see him live twice. Um, and what an amazing guitar player. And so I listened to Nevermore, and it took me a little bit of time to get into the vocals, but once I did, I mean, this track specifically, I would say has some like very Rob Halford esque moments. Um, and I think he's Jeff Loomis is reforming Nevermore. I could be wrong about that, but I heard something about that where the original singer has passed away, but he's left Arch Enemy a few years ago. I think he was really wasted in Arch Enemy because he basically just served as the rhythm guitarist in a lot of ways. That let him do a couple solos, but like he didn't get to write really any music, and that's fine because it wasn't really his band per se. Um, that's Michael Amot's band, but um, for somebody that's as good as Jeff Loomis, it just what a shame. So I mean, yeah, this is a killer track, and I had to put something from Nevermore on here.
So you are correct. They're actively searching for a vocalist now. But there's been some, I think the family of the vocalist is pissed at Jeff because they said that they would never do it like
Yeah,
that
he
again.
he did say that when they broke up basically they wouldn't do the band again unless it was them getting together, and that's Warrell Dane. I just like shit happens. It's the same thing with like Pantera. I think they've shown like with Pantera and I guess Linkin Park, like the other members of the band have some right to continue the music. Like we don't have to like it as fans. You don't go to the show if you don't like it, right? So like just, you know, enjoy the stuff and I think like when I went to see Pantera with you, like I know it's not really Pantera, but I love hearing the songs live. I love seeing the tribute that's there and everything. So it's like, just life's too short. Let's just enjoy it. It's not like there's any denigration of the name of the other members of the band or anything like that.
Oh, absolutely, man. You got you can't hang on to the past because you know what? You have the records, you have the CDs, you have a live concert, you have a video, so you have that original stuff. But the musicians themselves, you know what? Why are you putting them on a shelf?
Yeah.
They're still active and viable.
Yeah.
They still want to play music. You know, you're what you're trying to say is that you don't want them to play the music that you like. You want them to play something different. Let them do their own thing. Don't call it this. Don't call it that. It's not right. You know, if 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 uh Phil and Rex have the right to use the name, which apparently they do, okay, then by all means let them use the name. Uh you know, Charlie on drums has done nothing but want to be an exact replica of Vinnie Paul because he wants to do it for the fans. Okay. Zach has done an amazing job filling in, put, we want to put it that way, for Dimebag. And realistically, he's playing his own style, but he's still trying to be as close to what Dime would play as possible. We saw the show. It's outstanding. Would I want to see that same exact show again? Because you're talking about all they're doing is playing pretty much the same songs, maybe add one or two here, or and take one or two out. I don't know if I would want to see the show again. But if you told me, oh well, they're opening up for so and so, well, you know what? Then I'll see them. But to go see a headline show from them again, I don't know if I would do that per se. Not because I don't like them, just because I've seen it. So the same thing a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I'm not into repeating myself over and over and over again. You know, that's why I like Metallica and Iron Maiden. They play new shows for every tour. You know, they like Iron Maiden's new tour is going to be amazing. You know, back to the what is it? The run for the hills or something like that. Back to the 80s, some shit like that. It's going to be amazing. But the most recent one was a combination between Senjutsu and Somewhere in Time.
Yeah,
You know,
I like that they vary things up. I think I would see them again. But
Pantera.
yeah, but it's also been a couple years at this point. So like I wouldn't want to maybe do the same show twice in the same year. But yeah, I
Well,
mean,
we're going to see him again soon. I mean, when they're going to open for Metallica, so
yeah,
we're
no,
going
I
to see him
know, but
again.
that's not a headline, right?
No,
So
but it's a completely different setting. You're going to hear the songs. You're going to hear a different way. So that's okay.
yeah,
You know, um, I don't know if I would go see. I mean, like I said, if they were right now, from what I can tell, what they're doing is still kind of the same tour. They're just running around
yeah,
to different places. If they came back to the United States and they're playing as a headline act and they're doing the same show, I don't want to see that. Give me something different. I mean, I'm not trying to come down on them,
you just
but
you just want them to do the early years, the first three albums.
yes, the I want the power metal one. Or no, was it? Is it?
No,
Yeah, is
before
it power
Power
metal?
Metal,
Right?
that was the fourth album. Yeah. You want them to do the stuff with the first singer, the I can't even
Yeah,
remember
that
his name.
that guy. Was
Yeah.
it Terry?
Terry I wanted to say Terry Bollea, but that's Hulk Hogan. Um Terry we'll just say Terry Crews and leave it at that.
This is Terry Crews. No, you're talking about Ted Cruz,
Well, no,
the politician.
Terry Crews is the black actor.
Yes.
No, I can't.
Wow.
Well,
It went off the rails on that one.
Terry Glaze.
Terry Glaze.
We're big
Anyways.
fans. You can tell. Um, all right, so track 9, getting back on track, is Corporate Masters from Tad Morose. So that was the first band I heard with Urban Breed as the lead vocalist. He's another Swedish vocalist. It's power metal. What's cool also is coincidentally, like I picked this song because it's my favorite song on that album, but um it also blends almost perfectly from We Disintegrate. Like if you had it where like it because there's like We Disintegrate kind of ends on a guitar sustain, and then this song starts on a guitar sustain in the same note, and so it's like so cool that it carries over like that. But Urban Breed became the vocalist for Bloodborne. Or sorry, Bloodborne. That's a video game. Bloodbound, and I love the first and third album from that band, which he's the vocalist on. I like the second album a lot too, and that was another vocalist who I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah, he left the band and came back to it, and he did 2 albums. But he was in Tad Morose for a while before there, and this was a band that I picked up randomly again at Diamond Head Records. Just saw their album there, didn't really know what I was looking for. So one of the guys that worked there said they were cool, so I checked it out. Like I kind of miss those days where you could just like pick up a random album, and it was a gamble. But I found a lot of good music that way.
You know, that's how I discovered Halloween. I walked into a record store in Yonkers. I forgot what the name of the store was. It was my favorite record store in Yonkers because it was one I had to drive to, but it had so much cool stuff. Always had imported metal and stuff. And I walked in one day and the guy had just dropped the needle on Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1. It had just come out.
That's a good one.
And I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And he told me about it, and I grabbed it and I went home and I listened to it for hours.
Didn't even pay for it.
Um,
Just ran out of the store.
I dropped them to $10,
Black
but
pen,
man,
$10, man. Remember that?
if I'm not mistaken, the album was like $7.99. You know, it was pretty cool. I was like, oh, I'll buy this. This is so cool. And it was something brand like I had never heard of him before. And then, I kind of got into him after for a little while. And then because they were over, from Germany, I kind of lost touch because they didn't really make it that big in the States.
Yeah.
So
Oh, moving on to track 10. This was another band that I got into from their first album, and this one surprised me because I put it in the CD player and I didn't realize that their vocalist had changed. And so when I first heard the vocal, I was like, am I listening to the right thing? And then I looked at the CD and I noticed the change. So it was The Haunted with Hollow Ground from their Made Me Do It album. And a lot of times, obviously, when a vocalist changes, it can be, that can make or break whether you like a band. Because it is such an important part of the sound. Sometimes you can have a drummer change or something like that, and you don't even really notice. People like us who are huge fans of music, obviously we notice those little details. But a massive change because their drummer and their vocalist changed for this album, and it was a solid change. I like both versions of the band. So Peter Dolving left from their first album, and Marco Aro joined. And Marco has a much more aggressive, growly style. And whereas Peter is, he has a little more poetic sensibility, sings clean and rough vocals, which are a little more on the screaming side than the growling side. So this was a big change, and I remember putting this album in, and it's a relatively short album as a whole. But it went by like lightning fast, and I loved every track as it went through. And the Hollow Ground was the one that really like stuck out to me, where it's one of those that like I can probably sing the whole thing from beginning to end, like, even, melodies and everything like that, where, not even listening to the album for years. And so it's I love the Haunted. I think, now like they're releasing some singles which sound great. I'm glad to see them kind of back around. But there's certainly been a bunch of lineup changes in the band, and it's interesting because it's a tale of two bands, kind of like Van Halen.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you got me into these guys, and I like some of their stuff. It's pretty interesting. I think I liked more stuff off the first album.
Yeah, I think you were more into Dolving as a whole than Marco.
Actually, now I think about it, I'm trying to look because there's one song I know that I have on my playlist, and it's not popping up here, and I'm trying to find out. Oh, it was off of Revolver. That's the album that I like. 99.
Yeah,
I like that.
99 is a
That
killer song. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that song. So, all right. So that's your first 10 on the CD. So we're gonna switch it up again, and I'll finish off the rest of my CD.
So no
Um,
crossover in all of those first 10.
in the first 10,
Yeah.
there's no crossover, but there is a crossover song.
Okay. Okay.
But what we have announced, there's no crossover.
Yeah. So you're gonna have Tad Morose on there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Uh, no,
they,
not at
they
all.
are a cool band. So if you've never heard of them, it's not the best name for a band, but like there's some good stuff.
So if you want to pick it up from song number 11, if you want to sit there and say, okay, so we've finished the first side, if you will, or we've gotten to the midway point. In all actuality, this CD literally changes for me at this time because the songs begin to get heavier, per se, and then they get lighter again. So there's a real heavy section here in the middle. So song number 11 for me is "The Trees Have Eyes" by King Diamond.
Okay.
Now, that's off of the House of God album. I mean, it's got such it's almost a standard chug guitar riff. This was an album, made in 2000. That's for King Diamond. It was part of the string of albums that he kept putting out that was telling story after story, and this was just one of the standout songs in my opinion. It's almost like, let's try this. It's very almost it's kind of weird to say, like almost standard, to use Lars Ulrich's frames, kind of stock. But for me, the riff, I like the riff a lot, and so that kind of puts it over the edge for me as far as, I'm gonna put it on a CD because I want to hear something that has a good riff, kind of thing. I don't always put my favorite song because it's, the favorite song doesn't always have the riff. But when you're trying to find something that goes along with something else, this riff does it for me. So that's why I have that on there.
Okay. Okay. It's not one of my favorite King Diamond albums, but that's a pretty cool song. God, that's it's a weird album because it's got a lot of like really short tracks and little in-betweeners and that kind of stuff. And
Right.
and so yeah, it is kind of like a return to, I not a return, I guess, because he'd been focusing on like Voodoo tells us a bit of a story and things like that, like where that's kind of King Diamond's thing. But there was a couple albums there, like Spider's Lullaby, that like kind of goes back to like how the first album was, where it's not really like a consistent story. It's more like what's the term, like anthology kind of style of
Right.
stories.
Uh-huh.
So like this one really kind of goes more back to that, and which I think is where he usually prospers a bit more. Go like I think the best album in between the older stuff and the newer stuff was probably like Abigail 2, where he's kind of going more back to like telling a full story and Give Me Your Soul Please, stuff like that, where I just don't know this album well enough to tell you if like this is the best track on there or not, you know?
Right, right. It probably isn't.
Fair
But
enough.
it's still, I mean, like I said, I just like the riff on this, and it went along with went along with the riff on the next song, which is "Yesterday Don't Mean Shit" from Pantera off of Reinventing the Steel. Um, the riff is not exact, but there's enough similarities to say, "Oh yeah, this is the riff. This is a cool riff." I could have chosen a couple of different Pantera songs from this album, but because of the riff and what I was trying to achieve, this is the song I picked. And I mean, it's still a good song. I love the song. The first three songs in this album are really good. Um, and this was the one that I picked.
I would agree with you. This is the best riff on this album. I actually had this on my list, and I had to sacrifice one song because, like I told you, while I was putting my list together, I based like the first song that I picked to go on my list was Pinball Map, and then I forgot to write it down. So I had like I had a full list, and I'm like, I'm going to put stuff in order, and I was like, I'll start with Pinball Map. And I'm looking, I'm like, where is it? so so I had to sacrifice one track, and this is the one that I did. So yeah, it was if I had 19 tracks, then this would be 19.
I mean, you think about you might could have squeezed it on there. You got to compress those data files,
Put everything at like 1.5 speed.
right? So, I mean, this album, a lot of people kind of attack this album for its kind of it was all over the place. I guess you want to put it that
The
way.
band wasn't cohesive at that point, and you could
Yeah, they
tell.
weren't good. But look, Hellbound, Goddamn Electric, Yesterday Don't Mean Shit, Revolution Is My Name. I mean, I skipped over You Gotta Belong to It, but those four out of the first five songs were freaking awesome. And I don't listen enough to You've Got to Belong to It for me to sit there and criticize it or not criticize it.
Yeah.
I literally just listen to the other four songs. Sorry. Anyway, so moving on now, number 12 is a band that at the time I didn't really get into a lot. I actually got into them a few years later, but this was a song that I had caught a couple times, and I'm like, it wasn't bad. Phony Smiles and Fake Hellos from BLS, Black Label Society, off of their debut album Sonic Brew. Um, in all God's honest truth, at the time, I didn't know when they released their first album. I knew No More Tears had they did a really kind of like what's the word? I don't want to use the word dirty, but like just a grimy sounding version of No More Tears that ended up being like I think on a Japanese bonus track of this album. But this song, it has its ups and downs. It's got a really cool riff and the way he plays it. It's just this whole album has kind of got a sleazy, gritty, grindy kind of vibe to it. I guess
You
that's what
might
he
say
was.
groovy.
No, not groovy net. Like it's sludgy.
Well,
It's
groove
something.
metal is
He was
sludgy.
groove metal. Like I listen to Pantera and I don't get the same vibes. Like just the sound on it. It's tuned down really really low. It's just kind of like it's not muddy, but it's definitely like gritty sounding, and it's just kind of like he was just dragging you through the streets, kind of gritty and grimy kind of thing. And I think that's the sound he was trying to achieve, and he succeeded.
You know, Mike Piazza does vocals on this album
Yes, I do.
on Stronger Than Death.
Yeah, it was an interesting album. but definitely tuned down, very open, airy sounding guitars, but you know, it's one of those songs that you kind of really have to get into to like, and I kind of groove with it a little bit. All right, moving on. Song number 14, Bleed Me from Overkill off the Bloodletting album. Um, Overkill has been one of those bands that have just never stopped doing anything. I came in and out of listening to Overkill over the years. That period of time in the early 2000s where I was just basically piss broke, um, l- kept me from it kind of kept me from being the record collector that I always was, and I just lost touch with the music scene. I got more into computers and out of music, and Overkill's those albums there in the 2000s, in the late 90s, even mid 90s. Some were good, some were bad. You had some hits and misses. This one is kind of like a overall is kind of like a miss, but this song "Bleed Me" is pretty cool. It's almost kind of like Overkill's attempt to being mainstream in a way, because it's really hard for them to be mainstream. But this one was probably the closest thing to song, so that's why it's on there.
Yeah, we talked about Overkill on an episode, and I'm struggling to remember when we went over it, but we talked about several different albums, and this kind of era was not their best. Like I think they came back with, was it Immortalis or was it even before that?
Yeah, Immortalis was good.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not bad, but it's like they kind of went groovy for a while, where they changed from like classic thrash metal to groove metal, and then kind of came back around to thrash. And I definitely like those time periods a lot more than this kind of middle section. So I honestly don't know the song. I might if I heard it, but it's not sticking out to me.
See, but what was funny is like right the year before they put out Necroshine, all right, and Necroshine, the song is great. My December song is great. Stone Cold Jesus the song is great. So they've got some good songs on there. But then when they come out with this album, it's kind of like they almost kind of went backwards,
Mhm.
or it was they were just trying to kind of find their place, and they didn't fit into the melodic death metal scene. They didn't fit into the grunge scene, and they didn't fit into the new metal scene.
Yeah, square peg round hole situation. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Oh, I lost my list here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The next song. So now we're going to get to a bunch of songs that a lot of people are going to know. So, number 15 for me from the band Soulfly, Back to the Primitive. This is the first song off of their second album. And I was a big Soulfly fan when the first album came out. I thought that album is amazing. I picked this one up. I was like, all right, this song is cool. Back to the Primitive. Fuck all your politics. Love the song. The rest of the album, it doesn't get better per se, but it gets different. There's that. This is more to me the hint of the new metal that they got accused of being. During this time, they had Corey Taylor, who was still brand new to the scene from Slipknot, do a little bit of rapping with some clean vocals on a song of theirs. So it's not overall it's a strong album, but it's not as strong as the first one was. But this song, Back to the Primitive, was just killer.
What's funny is I don't like Soulfly's first few albums, because they're more like the stuff that what was the last album he did with
Sepultura.
Sepultura,
Yeah, that was
Roots.
the Roots.
So it's more along those lines where I loved um Chaos AD, but I wasn't as much into Roots. Like I respect it. I think it's a cool album, but it's not one that I ever really go back to and listen to. And so, he kind of delved more into his his roots. Not a pun non intended for sure. But like it's very new metal and it's very South American sounding, right? And Primitive, I think, has some of those elements in it. And then what's funny is as Soulfly went on, Soulfly started to sound more like early Sepultura, and then Sepultura starts to sound a little more like Soulfly in some ways. So very interesting dynamic there, where like they just kind of traded some aspects of the way they're playing. But like I actually really quite like more modern Soulfly, where he got more back into like thrash metal, death metal kind of sounding. I want to say like the last couple albums, Ritual and Totem, I think were really cool. So just interesting how things change as time goes on. But yeah, if you listen to the first Soulfly album and the last one, you're like, you're is this the same band?
There are like there are a couple of really fast songs on the first Soulfly album,
Yeah,
but it's so erratic in that regards.
yeah, it's
And
very different.
and this one's like that too because you go from Back to the Primitive, and then I really like the song Pain that comes after this Back to the Primitive,
Mhm.
and then Bring It. I mean, you're talking Bring It's a really fast song, and then you come back with Jump the Fuck Up, which I love. That of course I can't play that very often out in public. I get kind of weird looks, but that's the one. That's the song with Corey Taylor on it. But then there's a slow song called Sun Song with Sean Lennon. So he did a lot of collaborations. I mean, he did Terrorist with Tom Araya. There's a whole bunch of different things that are on here.
Yeah,
So it's a very eclectic album. He definitely went more extreme as time went on, and was more. It was more and more extreme as each album went on. They got away from the new metal a little bit, and then they were really just like a heavy metal. Then they became, a thrashish band, and then it just got extreme. It was way past that,
yeah.
almost industrial like, but it wasn't that, you know. So like, I'm not a really big fan of Archangel or Archangel or however you want to say it. So it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is really extreme. Um, but I did like a couple things off of Ritual. So anyway, moving on. After Primitive, now we have the first crossover between the two of us, Wicker Man from Iron Maiden. I mean, how can I not have that song on a CD with 2000 from the year 2000? That song's amazing.
It is. I mean, I said so and picked it for my list for the same reason.
I know we talked about it earlier, so it's an incredible song. That's song number 16 for me. Song number 17, we talked about the soundtrack earlier for Mission Impossible 2. This song also appeared on it. I did mention it. I Disappear from Metallica. This was the song that started the end of Napster.
Bastards.
Look, you know what? I'm going to put. I'm going to.
kidding.
No. This has nothing to do with what you just said. A lot of people, have angrily been upset with Lars Ulrich over the years, and I get it. I defended it back then, and I say the same thing I say now. Okay, if and I'm not a musician per se. I'm not. I played music. I play bass. I have a song that's recorded that I have a demo of in my my phone that I carry with me everywhere. Um, however, if I would have been a musician and I'm recording the song and all of a sudden I hear an unfinished version on the radio
Oh
and I'm
yeah,
a I'm a
that'd be
main
wild.
I'm a mainstream artist, dude, I'm going to be pissed off. What happened? I'm going to get my lawyers all over that shit. And Metallica at the time had some of the most, some of the best lawyers out there in the music business. Their management team is bar none is one of the best. So they immediately jumped onto it. The way they went about it, completely bad, completely bad optics. We're going to go after each individual person. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
You know,
but there's no precedent there either, right? Because the digital world is different than the physical world in that, you know, well, in every aspect. But like there was no real precedent set there, so you can look back at it and see it through different eyes than through like it was at the time. As a God 14-ish-year-old kid, watching on Newgrounds the Napster bad animation and all that stuff. Like it was easy to be mad at Metallica, but I was really into Metallica back then. And so there, when you're a fan of that band, like, you know, it probably helped them in a lot of ways to maintain a lot of their fandom. But that being said, like it is a tough one where a lot of people don't care because they don't have money, they don't have stocks, they don't have all these things, so it's easy to just go like, well, it doesn't affect me, and I get that. So, when big millionaire comes around saying you're stealing from me, people don't have sympathy for that, right? So, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's how people think. So, whether you agree with it or not, like I think time has shown that Lars was right. Oh my God, I threw up in my mouth saying that. Um, so- but it did change the music industry in a lot of ways for the worse, and that doesn't mean that it's not the natural progression of things. But it is something that affects the bands we all love today, where it's harder to tour, it's harder to do those things because the digital revolution has changed music in such a way, and music, movies, any kind of media, to where creativity has dropped off in a large way. So
the biggest takeaway that I got from this entire era that happened was normally the music business has been the one in charge. And in this particular case, they got caught completely with their pants down and had no idea how to rebound. And their idea of rebounding was going after individuals.
yeah.
Um, and so instead of trying to come up with a way that they could do this legally and correctly, which is what the whole premise behind Apple Music was at the time, or iTunes. Um, that was the first one where you said, "Oh, you could download legally, and you could buy it for $1." And that obviously for people who were already downloading illegally, like I'm not going to pay $1 to download the song, but for people who um, were wanted to do it the right way or wanted the ability to do it that way because they wanted another format, they didn't want to buy CDs. That was the most viable option. Obviously, other options eventually later came out. So the music industry was being reactive rather than being proactive, and they just got totally hammered. And they lost their shirts. I mean, the record industry model and business model has completely changed because of their failure to adapt with the times.
Yeah, and they've still lack or have not changed in a lot of ways, and that's led a lot of musicians to self-produce and go to YouTube and things like that because they can make more money that way than touring with a band, and the model for the music industry is very messed up now, and I mean, I think many of us have studied that and watch it. um and everything's slow to change. Like, I mean, it's obviously not going to go into politics or anything like that, but like you can see the world is usually progressing a lot faster than the people at the top, and that's because people get set in their ways, and it's like things don't change on that level. So like with the music industry, these executives and that kind of stuff that were making tons and tons of money, and they're used to the way that things are going, they're not seeing that the world is changing around them, and all of a sudden, like you said, it hits them with their pants down, and then really the people that suffer are the people that are the creatives and the ones that are making the difference. And so, like, I give a lot more shits about musicians than I give about the executives running the industry.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the artists are the ones that are suffering from all this. I mean, now with the whole streaming thing, artists. I mean, when you think
There's two
about
sides to that
certain
coin,
things,
though. So, but keep
no,
continue.
there's totally two sides of that coin. You know, artists, are they getting paid enough? No, I get that. There needs to be some sort of reform in that. I get that. However, okay, so what I hear a lot though is, I look at the numbers that are displayed from Spotify. Oh, like for instance, the band I turned you on to, Saigon Kick.
Mhm.
Okay, they only got one song, I think, that's got over several 100,000
Yeah.
streams. Okay, we think about that. Saigon Kick's not getting paid much money because they're not generating streams.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can't really complain. Oh, I'm not getting money. Well, fucker, you're not generating any streams. No one around the world knows who you are
Well, part of that
anymore.
is the record industry deciding who is and who is not worthy of that too. Like, who are they going to play on MTV back in the 80s versus and there's a lot of factors. There's some bureaucracy to it. There is, oh, these guys don't have the right look, or
Yeah,
there's
but
so many
nowadays,
elements, right?
but nowadays, a band like Saigon Kick that doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
okay, is basically relying on their past fame.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything new. I get it, but there are other bands that are just as famous or just as you know noteworthy to some degree who have more streams, and they're making more money.
Mhm.
But it's not the money because these guys, what they're used to is if you had a single on the radio, you got paid a shit ton of money. If you had a hit single, you would get paid a shit ton of money. Okay, the money's changed. I get that. But why? What's the point? And then obviously this is a discussion for a whole nother time. But the best thing that was always told me when I first took music business classes was the people who wrote the song, I think it was Heartbreaker. It was either Heartbreaker or Hit Me With Your Best Shot for Pat Benatar. They took that song, they were able to retire off of that one song. The songwriters themselves, not even Pat, obviously, because Pat's still, playing,
Mhm.
but um, see, those songwriters off of that first album were able to, yeah, it was a song Heartbreaker. It was Jeff Gill and Cliff Wade. They were able to retire off of that, off the money that they made off of that song because it was a huge hit and still gets played and then they get residuals, I'm sure, every year and stuff like that. And that's, you know, it's amazing. But if it happened today, they're not getting that same amount of money
Yeah.
because the radio rights are different and streaming rights are different. And it's a completely screwed up model. And one last point on all that, when you were talking about how uh, big, big, multimillionaire, rich musicians, rich rock stars sue small companies or small people or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, JJ French from Twisted Sister had the best reason why this happens. Okay. Twisted Sister likes to make the claim that they're the biggest, most licensed rock or heavy metal band on the planet. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and that may be true. Okay. But they have to protect their brand. Metallica has to protect their brand. Kiss has to protect their brand. So what happens is that any instance in which the name is misused, they have to sue. They don't have a choice because if they allow it once, then what happens is that,
Opens the floodgates.
well, it's not that it just opens the floodgates, is that the next lawsuit, there's precedence for them
Yeah.
letting it go. So when that happens, they have to sue. They have like literally almost no choice. Otherwise, they can potentially lose their brand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's the reality of a situation, and then there's the optics of the situation, right? And then so there's people that, like, obviously JJ French is correct in that, right? But then there's people that are going to go, well, I don't care. You know, so
Of
like
course.
that's
I mean,
where the reality sets in of it.
there
So,
was a bar that's near my house
mhm,
called the Twisted Sister.
mhm.
It used to be a gas station. It closed down years ago, and then right on the corner they put up this bar. You know, they turned it into a pool house kind of place, and it was called the Twisted Sister.
Mm,
Well, they even had colors like, you know, a hot pink and black, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty blatant, you know.
yeah.
And go by there now. This no longer the Twisted Sister. I'll tell you that right now.
Mm,
That name has changed, but the reason why it became or the Twisted Sister at that place is because that's actually kind of I believe a motorcycle club out of Texas, out of here in Houston, that they're called the Twisted Sister or something to that effect, which is weird because Twisted Sister always portrayed themselves as a motorcycle club themselves. Um, and so
can you can
they
you imagine though all the bikers getting on and they look like that? They're all dressed up in lipstick and wigs and
that would be pretty weird. However, you know, so the bar is now got a different name, different color pattern, and all that stuff, and it's, you know, it's not the same.
yeah,
So
they're
they have to protect the brand. There's no choice.
yeah. Um,
All right, so the last few for me, I got two more songs on my CD. Um, so I did 17. I disappeared from Metallica. Song number 18, "The Renegades of Funk" from Rage Against the Machine from the album Renegades. It was the last album of music that was released by Rage Against the Machine. It's a covers album. Renegades of Funk is an Africa Bombata cover song. Um, Really cool version of the song. Um, that album has several cool covers on it. How can I just kill a man is on there. I believe the Ghost of Tom Joad, which was from a song that it was a B side earlier. I want to say that's the case because I know that excuse me, yet they did several covers and yes, the Ghost of Tom Joad, the Bruce Springsteen song is on there. Street Fighting Man, Rolling Stones song. Kick Out the Jams is an MC5 song. But Renegades of Funk, an African Bambaataa song from 1983, is a really cool song. I just love the tribal rhythms of it. Super, super cool song.
yeah, I mean isn't that their last album?
Yes, it was the
Yeah.
last album they put out.
Yeah, and it's kind of a downer to go out that way, but it is a cool cover album, and you know they have a really good discography as a whole. So I didn't even think you know putting that as an option. Just I didn't think about putting covers, but yeah, I mean it is a cool track.
Yeah, I mean it's distinct enough that it's not really the same song per se.
Yeah.
So I was able to, you know, come to grips with it in my mind. All right, last song on my CD is "We Are Motorhead" from Motorhead off the "We Are Motorhead" album. So, you know, quick and fast, last song. Let's jam it out. And that's my CD. It comes out to 78 minutes, 42 seconds. Um, that's my 19 songs.
So who was We Are Motorhead by? No, I'm just playing.
I think it was by Lemmy Kilmister.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, no, it's a cool one. Yeah, I see you running out of space. So, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I guess we have, well, we'll go over there. We have at least the one crossover, right?
Right.
So I left off on Hollow Ground, right? So I am going to another Swedish band, Hammerfall with Renegade. I really like that song as a whole, but I think it has one of the lamest motorcycle, like yeah, the revving of a motorcycle.
Oh,
Yeah, it's at the very beginning, like of the motorcycle start, and like you're gonna, and then it drives off kind of at the end. The song is great, but it's so goofy, but it's stuck in my mind. Like, you know, it's one of those like when I first heard it, I thought it sucked, but like over time, the song as a whole grew on me, and then there's that cheesiness of it's like "Brr, brr, 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 brr," like it's not great. But love the song. And what's interesting, I have another track written by Jesper Stromblad here. He wasn't in the band anymore. He started Hammerfall as their drummer, and then he became drummer for In Flames at the beginning. That was his own project, and then he went on to become their lead songwriter and rhythm guitarist. Very eclectic player, very impressive musician as a whole, and he still wrote songs for them even after leaving the band. Um, then I have my biggest anomaly on here. As you've seen, a lot of the stuff I have is a very fast-paced, mostly European metal. But I have the Hollow from A Perfect Circle, which I think after the spoody guitar, motorcycle driving off into the distance. This is a good place for this song. I originally had it at the very end, and I was like, it just feels so tacked on. But when I put it here, it actually fit in really well, especially with the track that's going to follow. But you mentioned you were into Judith. I thought about Judith, but I actually like this song a bit more.
I'm not super familiar with it because literally Judith was all I heard.
Gotcha.
I it was man, that whole time period is just so strange for me, man. Um, the year began sort of kind of the last week of 1999. I saw Metallica with Creed and Kid Rock opening up for him, and the rest of the year became really weird for me
Yeah.
after that.
Well, I mean, it's a good album. I would go back and give it a listen, just give it a try. Um,
I
but
have it. It's in my collection. It's right there at the end, right after Tool.
just not one you listen to.
It's just not what I listen to.
Gotcha. Well, then I have the next crossover that we have, which I think is the last crossover. I have I Disappear from Metallica. I listened to that one a lot back then. It's not by any means their best song, but it is cool. It's a really good riff that like sticks in your mind. I have good memories of Mission Impossible at that time too, so I think that's probably part of it. Is like that was to me one of the worst and best Mission Impossible movies because it is like really over the top action. Like it's not as like spy thriller, it's more action and doves flying, and it's a John Woo movie, so it's like it's really cheesy, but I like it for that reason now. At the time I was like, why is it so much worse than the first one? But like I like it now. Um all right, so yeah, I mean, you already kind of said what you thought about that one, so I'm just gonna keep going if that's fine with you.
I like Metallica.
That's what I've heard. Um, all right, so I have one that I don't know if too many people are gonna have heard of this band at all. But when I was younger, especially, I was really into like Japanese culture, anime, and stuff like that. I used to watch Japanimation when they used to call that here in the States on VHSs and things like that. I got into it from very young childhood because I had a neighbor that would have cassette tapes that his dad would bring over from Singapore or I'm sorry, the Philippines. Not, yeah. Anyway, from the Philippines. In Philippines, they speak Tagalog and they speak English, and so there's a lot of either English dub shows or subtitled. And so I got into anime when I was very young, and so. This was a band that I actually discovered back then, and I want to say that the first time I heard them was downloading something off of Napster, which I did not do. Um, so the song is called Hyaku no Oni ga Yoru wo Yoku, which means 100 demons wander in the night. It
Can
is.
you can you spell that for me, please? Just kidding.
It's from a band called Anmyoza, and that means gathering of yin and yang. It's a rough translation, and that's from their album Hyaki Ryouran, which means demon horde scattered everywhere, or can also translate to a welter of 100 demons. So what's cool about them is they are a folk metal band. So the riffs are really heavy, like super heavy, and they have elements of Japanese folk music. So they'll have like the flute that's often played, and I apologize, I can't think of the name. And they play shamisen with it, and they're one of their two vocalists. So they have like death growls, and they also have a very traditional female Japanese vocalist, and so it's a really interesting blend of sounds. Because I got into like X Japan, and we've talked about Loudness before. Both of us are fans of Loudness, and so I got really into them because it was just something very different, and I was playing like a lot of video games and stuff too, which had similar vibes. And eventually, they did some themes for some like TV shows and stuff. So they have a little bit of recognition here in the States, but obviously, you're much bigger in Japan. But I'm guessing you have not heard of them.
Nope, not whatsoever.
I gotcha. But it's a really cool track. When we do social media posts, we can like list some of these. So if you're interested in checking out something very different, I would recommend at least finding it and seeing if it's something that interests you. So my track 15 is Million Flame from Soilwork, from their The Chain Heart Machine, which is their second album. I was a huge fan of their first album, Steel Bath Suicide, and this to me was a little bit of a step down. They had a couple members change and leave, and so some of the songwriting I would say changed as far as like guitarists and that kind of stuff. And but this was a really cool song, and it's not a step down was only minor, right? Like I'm not talking a big huge difference. And then Soilwork over time really changed their sound, became much more commercial. They Man, what was their big album? Hold on one second. By the time they got to Natural Born Chaos, which was only 3 years later, there was it's quite a bit different. So, um, and you know what I'm realizing? So this I included it in 2000, which technically it's a 1999 song, but the single came out in 2000. So I'm breaking the rules.
Ah, rule
Yeah.
breaker.
Regardless, really cool song. Really enjoy the album. But those first couple albums for me is where the pocket is for Soilwork. Any experience with Soilwork?
Not a lot. I mean, I've picked up some of the stuff when you've talked about it, and I
Mhm.
like it. But I haven't been able to sustain it long enough to really get into anything because my life is that hectic.
Fair enough.
I can't listen to something for 3 or 4 hours and say, "Oh yeah, I can get into it." I would love to do that at work, but I just don't have the time to like sit and listen to something.
Right. It's always in the background while you're doing other stuff, and it's hard to focus. Like and it's yeah, it's tougher as adults to find that time. Even like I'm single, and I spend a lot of time, alone doing things, but even then, as an adult with the responsibilities you have, sometimes it's hard to just sit like, and that's why a long car ride could be awesome, because it's like you get a chance to just kind of listen to some music.
I wish I could do that. Except my wife calls me all the time.
Hey, appreciate
Oh,
that.
I do appreciate it. There's times where I'm like, damn, I want to listen to some songs.
Oh, my phone was dead. I'm sorry, honey. So, um, So my track 16 is Evolution, the Grand Design from Symphony X. Um, so Symphony X is American. Um, Probably one of the few American bands I have on my list here. Is progressive metal, and I got into them right around this time. I believe this was actually the first song I heard by them, and it's one that stuck with me to this day. It's one thing that I struggled with them initially was some of the production sounded a little bit drowned out, but the music was so good, and man, like even now the stuff that they're putting out is so cool. Like, there's one specific riff that comes to mind all the time, gets kind of stuck in my head, and when a band can do that, and like you will just be walking from one room to another, and you just start kind of like humming a familiar tune, and it's one of those that just gets stuck in their head. Like, so there's this track Iconoclast, which is a more recent one. So at this point, like 15 years old, but the main riff off of that song will get stuck in my head. But going back to the track I picked, like Evolution is one of those that like I heard it and I had to hear it again. I got a friend to burn the CD for me because I could not find it in the store, and there was only really one store in my area that carried that kind of music. And eventually, I did find it, and I had it for many years until I sold my CDs. So, any thoughts on Symphony X?
I've never gotten into Symphony X. I had heard about them. Like again, progressive has never been a big and high on my list.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Progressive has never really been high on my list when it comes to the style of music. I mean, Queensryche is the most progressive thing that I listen to now. I would say Iron Maiden and Queensryche, but like I've never got into Dream Theater except for a couple of things here and there. It's just never been something that's been on my radar, only
Yeah.
because it's too erratic, and like when I told you when I went to see um Opeth, sounded great. The performance was great. The guitar solos are great. I just that the radical shifting back and forth of different grooves and different riffs and stuff like that. It doesn't allow. I like to tap my foot. I like to bang my head, and it doesn't allow me to maintain that, and so it throws me off.
Yeah. No, I get that. Okay, so my track 17 is Heaven Denies by Demons and Wizards. Now, Demons and Wizards was Hansi Kirsch from Blind Guardian and John Schaefer from Iced Earth. Um, you take those two elements and put them together. Blind Guardian being, a progressive metal band from Germany, and then Iced Earth being a little more thrashy, but in some ways progressive. They mesh really well, the two guys together. And it was a project that like when I first heard about it, I was excited. I went out and got the album, and I thought it was really maybe a little lackluster as a whole to me. But this was the song that stuck out for me because it really captured the elements of those two bands together. Whereas there was a lot of really soft tracks on there. And so Blind Guardian focuses on a lot of mythology of like Tolkien and stuff like that, whereas Iced Earth also deals with a lot of mythology and more Egyptian kind of stuff. I think John in his younger days was very inspired by like Egypt and pharaohs and some of the stuff like that. So there was a lot of stuff that crossed over really well, but as a whole, like it's probably not their best work together. But this song in particular, I think, is really killer. It's very heavy and um, worth a listen.
I've never listened to them. There's a lot. So it's funny because I feel bad that you've listed a lot of stuff here that, you know, in some cases relatively popular, like In Flames
Mhm.
or Children of Bodom, or you know, but it's one of those things where there's only so much time in a day for so much stuff to go on.
Yeah, and it was just
And
we were listening to very different stuff at this time.
well, but not just that, like, you know, over the years, like I've known about Demons and Wizards. I've known about Blind Guardian. I've known about um Iced Earth, you know, and I've listened to some Iced Earth stuff, and I've like really tried to get into it, and I'm like, wow, this just doesn't work for me,
Yeah.
you know. And I feel bad because sometimes I sit there and say, man, you know, all these people like Iced Earth, you know, and I listen to it, and I'm like, "Nah, I don't. It just doesn't do it for me, you know. So it's one of those things where it's just one of those bands that I didn't get into, and so I didn't know a lot about Demons and Wizards, um, and that was, you know, one of those things that just passed me by, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Um, I think it passed a lot of people by, honestly. Again, I'm not really recommending that album as a whole, but the track. But some of the stuff that followed is a lot better. All right, and so I only had 18. So I ran up to, I don't know how to. Let me convert this to minutes here because I've got it in seconds, which is if
What?
anybody out there functions in seconds rather than minutes, um, I've got 79.75 minutes, so just under 80 minutes. Um,
I say
so
like around 79 minutes and 40
yeah,
seconds.
just about right. Um, So, I've got All Over the Nations from Halloween from the Dark Ride. That's the song that kind of starts off like almost like Canon and D from Pachelbel. Um, and it's just one of those songs that, like, Halloween is interesting because like I've said, that it's very uplifting metal, because the topics they sing about are very rarely anything dark, which is funny because the album's called The Dark Ride. But everything that they do is much more like um, more on the side of like the brighter end of metal, and so I love this track. I think it's like really cool. It's from the Andy Darris era of the band, which I guess they're still technically in, but the other guys have come back and rejoined. They have three vocalists essentially now, and it's
That's just a bit too much.
it works though. Like, the last album that they released, um, it's a really fun album, and it's got like so many interesting elements where it's basically like just a fun project for these guys to all like work together. And there's some really good tracks that I think it works. Like, what's the singer from the Keeper of the Seven Keys?
Kai?
No, Kai Hansen was the original one, and
Uh,
then
oh, Michael, what's Kinski, no?
Kiske, yeah. So, yeah, Michael Kiske, and yeah, you mentioned Kai Hansen. So all three of them, trade off parts, and Kai I think mostly focuses on the guitar parts, but he'll have a little singing section, here and there where it's really fun. It works, and the band as a whole is just like kind of a joy to listen to now in a lot of ways. Because there was drama in the past, and I'd love to go over Halloween at some point, but like I think throughout all their different eras, they found lots of moments of like just good sweet spots where they were just putting out music that was something they were happy with and passionate about. So, and I feel that in their music a lot of times. So, this is an album that maybe is a bit overlooked in some ways because it's not one of their strongest, but it has some really good tracks on it. So if you kind of glossed over the Dark Ride, I would check that one out too.
All right, I'll definitely. I mean, I like Halloween, and it's a lot of stuff that I haven't um, listened to in a long time. Like I said, I picked up that Keeper of Seven Keys, on a whim, and I've picked up some of their albums over the years. It just never really sustained my fandom, I guess you could say, for them.
It's fair enough. So this won't be, next week, but when we get to it, what album? I mean, what year are you going to pick next?
I'm thinking probably somewhere in the early '90s.
Okay. So
Somewhere in the early
you're not
'90s.
set yet, but somewhere in the early 90s.
Yeah, I'm not set yet. Somewhere in the early '90s, probably somewhere between 90, 91, or 92, somewhere around there.
Okay. Okay. Well, that gives me a little idea of where we're going.
All right. Well, that's our episode for tonight. There is no big four on this episode, but we'll get back to that again soon. In the meantime, if you're a first time listener or a regular and haven't done so already, please click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get our latest episode as soon as it drops. And while you're there, leave us a comment or two and rate us while you're at it. Thanks again for listening.
And don't forget you can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and on X, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new show. And remember, tune in to the next episode where we'll spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.